Spencer, here's the torch.
Oh, thank you. That was pretty smooth.
Yeah.
All right. Well, he talked about before Nintendo. I'm going to talk about during Nintendo. And I found an article on raregamer.co.uk, and it's about a behind-the-scenes look at Donkey Kong Country, which is really the heart and soul of what they were in the Super Nintendo. And
which game is that?
It was a platformer on the Super Nintendo. You probably missed it, but it's like
I've never heard of it.
A reinvention of Donkey Kong. Remember
I was playing Buster Butts Loose.
Oh my god, so was I. But anyway, that's another story. That's a different map out that we're gonna get to later. Fun button map trivia. We almost did that. Anyway, but anyway, it does get into a little bit of the history. And one of the things I found interesting was I'll read a little bit from an excerpt from it. Following a string of commercial successes during the late 80s and early 90s, they faced an uncertain future, as did the industry in general. The next generation of systems had started to arrive in the form of the 3DO, Amiga CD32, and Philips CDI. But owners of existing 16-bit consoles seemed curiously reticent to upgrade, thanks largely to the unproven nature of CD-ROM systems and the high cost of new hardware. Sensing that the current generation still had some life in it, but simultaneously mindful of an exciting new era just around the corner, the Stampers began to invest heavily in new graphics tech, with the ultimate aim of creating one of the most advanced code houses in the British Isles. And this leads to Silicon Graphics, which allowed them to create 3D rendered characters. And Nintendo was so into what they saw that they said, you can have one of our biggest franchises that we haven't touched in forever, as Nintendo does. And they did Donkey Kong, and they let them reinvent Donkey Kong as another platformer. Because that's the only thing that Super Nintendo had. But they made another platformer, and it's the Donkey Kong that everyone knows and loves, Donkey Kong Country. So that's an exciting thing. The article hints at something, and they don't outright say it because I don't think it's true, but I think it's an interesting discussion. Is Donkey Kong in the Silicon Graphics 3D engine was made because they were gearing up to compete, I guess, with the 3DO and all those bigger, more expensive consoles that all of them, whatever, ultimately flop. But it's hinted that Donkey Kong or Rare in some part was responsible for the failure of those consoles because they were able to make something that is comparable but on 16-bit hardware that already exists. So kind of an interesting idea to think that way. Again, they don't outright say it, but it's certainly hinted at. This interview was done with Brendan Gunn, who worked on the graphics. And it says that a funny story is they went to the zoo to look at the gorillas and see if they could get something that looked nice. And ultimately they did not. Apparently it all looked terrible when they tried to actually do it in the actual game. They said it just looked so horrible and they gave up. So they said he looked more like a horse.
And thus we have the Donkey Kong anime.
Yeah. Obviously. It's a natural transition. One interesting thing about the level design is that they use Post-it notes to mix and match different pieces. So if they had like the whole level, and they put different pieces of it on different Post-it notes that they just drew by hand. And what they would do is, if they didn't like it in one certain area, they would take the Post-it note and either switch it up and mix and match, or even take it to a different level entirely. So all their levels were just a different collaboration of different Post-it notes. Apparently, that's something
Staples had to do with the production of DK.
Yeah. Well, Staples is a great company. They do a lot of really good stuff, and they got a really good deal right now on Post-it notes. So if you're a game designer or just a fan of creation in general, I highly recommend you use Staples and use our promo code ButtonBop. You'll get 10% off your order. Thank you, Teddy.
It's our sponsor, Staples.
It's my visual promo.
This was This was in there.
Just go up to the Staples counter and tell them, Button Bob.
Button Bob, give me this share.
Bring your stapler. Button Bob. You know what it is. No more needs to be said.
They'll go, yes, sir.
You've applied 70% off Post-it notes.
They bring out a whole pallet worth of Post-it notes.
That's what they used to make Elden Ring. It's just 1,000 Post-it notes.
God. Yeah, I'm a game developer. I got my Post-it notes.
You look like Charlie and Always Sunny in the mailroom.
Just everywhere.
That's how Legend Jumper was conceived. Post-it notes.
Yeah. 5 Post-it notes, you get Legend Jumper.
Yeah, just they're all pointing up.
We got a hidden gem here today, boys.
Apparently, again, this is what the article says. It's a lot of rumor and hearsay, but it is fun to think about. Miyamoto was unimpressed with Donkey Kong Country. He said the focus was too much on graphics and not enough on gameplay. And I found that to be interesting, not because I think he's a bad guy or he's wrong or anything. This is all allegedly. They've asked him since, and he's denied this.
Yeah, he took it back later.
Yeah. He's taken it back. I don't know if he says that he never had any issues with it, but apparently that's what he said in the past. But I do find it interesting because he was saying that before, like, our internet community, like, I hear that all the time on shows now, like on the YouTube channels now, as people arguing that they don't care about the graphics as much as gameplay, et cetera, et cetera. And I just find it interesting that Miyamoto, the most legendary game designer, was also saying that about Donkey Kong Country. Which is like, I don't know. I think Donkey Kong Country is arguably better than Super Mario World.
Oh,
not
absolutely.
Not just in graphics, but in level design and gameplay.
If you I always believe that quote because there's the evidence that, like, if you look at Yoshi's Island, apparently they wanted him to do it pre-rendered, and you could see remnants of that with, like, the first cutscene, and then he made it like a coloring book.
Yeah.
And
it's
I
like
think
the
that's
opposite.
him being like, nope.
This is a big fuck you to everybody. He's like an angry child.
No, Yoshi's Island crayon.
You want to look realistic, like with this crayon. Apparently, Gun's only regret with the game was the map screens. He said that he did all these great pre-rendered maps, but the characters only went in like a straight line from level to level, and he had plans that, and I think they do this in maybe in one of the other Donkey Kongs, or I can't remember, but he wanted to do it in the first one where when you go to the next stage, the characters will walk on the map in like the right, like in a path that looks kind of natural.
The third game kind of has like an open map.
Yeah.
I'm confused.
And I think that's
Don't
what he
the
wanted.
GBA ones or something do? I feel like later in dishes you see Donkey on the map. Am I just not understanding what you're saying?
Like you could traverse the island in a way?
Well, in the Donkey Kong ones, you just shoot the guy. He just goes from one end to the other, like in a straight line. Like his character just moves.
Yeah.
But he wanted it to where the Donkey Kong would actually like walk, and it would be not on like a straight line. It would be like if you're going up a mountain, he would like climb the mountain to the next level. He thought that in the first one it was just very lazy.
Okay.
Oh.
No.
So
So pretty
more like 3, because 3 had like the sections where like the boat where you're like sailing around the areas and stuff, and you could get off the boat and like walk around the maps.
Yeah. He talks a little bit about the second and third, although he says they just weren't as important to him. He wasn't as big of a fan of them, especially I'm assuming 3. And he said that the two effects that he really liked were the flooded ship and the honey effects. And he said he couldn't remember which games those are from. Pretty sure those are both 2.
Yeah, they're both 2.
Definitely honey, but yeah. So I'm pretty sure he didn't really care for the third one, which seems to go along with what most people think of the series. So map out on that coming soon.
Did they mention the making the character models or anything?
No, that all was tied up in the 3D Silicon graphics. They didn't talk too much about it. Just that it was amazing to Nintendo and they loved it.
Well, I
For Miyamoto,
remember
apparently.
hearing about them, about the development of those games, and where it was so early on. In order to make the character, like the frames of animation, they would spend one day making one frame. It took that long to render it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, which I mean, I guess makes sense at the time.
And such a far cry from their past where they were doing like two games a month.
Yeah, it's like today we got one frame of animation of DK like crouching.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's really impressive that Rare is like they made one of the most iconic Super Nintendo games. I think when you think about the boundary pushing software on the console, it's Country and Star Fox. Star Fox not as much for like the best reasons. I mean, like they used like the mode 7 or something, but I mean it was really like an advent for like 3D polygons and everything. And they had a couple guys who were like really hard workers, passionate about work. They got some Americans working on it.
It was Argonaut, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I feel like with Country, it's kind of the same story. So it's just, I don't know. It's just interesting to see the talents that pushed the technical spectrum on the console.
Yeah. I would really love to investigate some of the Banjo-Kazooie era stuff. This guy worked on Donkey Kong 64 and has like zero things to say about it. But I'd be very interested to learn more about the making of Banjo-Kazooie, because that'd be like their biggest offshoot during the Nintendo era. Most successful one, I would say.
Kind of sad you didn't talk about Jordan versus Bird on the Nintendo.
Next time.
Jordan versus Bird 1-on-1.
Is that a basketball game?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened to Mr. Pants?
Yeah, hey, it's Mr. Pants on Game Boy Advance.
Did you write that? That's too clever. That should be the slogan.
No, I didn't write. What?
Hey, it's Mr. Pants on Game Boy Advance. Yeah. Wow.
Let's do a dance.
Hey y'all, don't forget to subscribe to them button mappers.